taking an unconventional look at stocks, property, bonds, economics, and more. This is the Total Money Management Podcast with Steve Moriarty, Tom Hill, and Jacob Senior.
Welcome to Total Money Management Podcast. We're back, and this week we're talking about September week 16 to the 20th. I'm back with Tom and Steve. Are you all right, gentlemen?
All good.
Good.
Very well.
I had a bit tricky with the air conditioning in here,
It's a bit cold now, isn't it?
Steve had the heater on.
It was a bit hot, wasn't it?
Well, key points this week, we're going to talk about loans aplenty, escalators and elevators. We'll talk that in a second. US retail and the lack of growth there, or hasn't really grown too much. Stress test, industry dynamics, and we'll talk about cars and COVID as well. But we'll kick off with the big issue, which is an interesting one this week. The US Fed has cut rates by 0.5%. They were negotiating on, kind of debating between whether they were going to cut them 0.25% or 0.5%. And they're divided on 0.5.
Yep, decided.
Yes.
That too.
Yes, because inflation appears under control. But I mean, if you look back in time, whenever the Fed's cut rates, generally the stock market, when it's been this expensive, has fallen.
Yep.
Not that the economy is the stock market. We need to make that really clear. But we've had a really good rally. The last few days.
Well, yeah, but geez, mate, it's only been like 2 bloody days.
Oh, well.
I know, but that's what people say. Look, I actually said during the week to some people, look, I expect there's going to be some volatility, but I wasn't sure whether it was going to be good volatility or bad volatility.
Yeah.
Right? And it turned out to be a bit of a nothing burger, but largely, although I must admit, they announced it on Wednesday, and then I think the market went down like 0.4, the S&P, but Thursday it smashed it out of the park. It went up about 1.5, I think.
Mm-hmm. It was a nice week.
It was overall. It was pretty good. But my point there, Tom, is the market prices things in that it knows about. Okay, Feds are going to cut rates. Okay, is it a quarter or a half? Doesn't matter. It really just the idea that they're going to cut, and the market prices that in, right? And that's the important part. Is it's the unexpected event. You know, you imagine if they came out and went, right, we're going to raise rates 0.25%. They'd go, holy hell, we thought you'd cut rates. No, you know, the economy's going gangbusters. And this is my argument, right? The US growth is at 3% real, right? And again, like we talked about last week, the government spending a lot of money, well, there ain't going to be any recessions when the government's pumping out 6% of GDP. And that recession argument now has sort of died a slow death, although there's some who are like, oh, no, it's going into a recession. And it's like, well, not at 3% growth. Retail sales, as we mentioned here, are not booming, but they're steady. Wages are rising. They got an investment boom. So you have to look at it and say, okay, well, how do you see a recession, which is 2 quarters of negative growth, from 3% growth? You know, it'd really take some serious sort of turnaround.
Yeah.
And I just can't see it.
Ahead of the elections too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Kind of expecting things to be bullish.
Yeah, well, they're gonna. We're heading into the best 3 months of the year. We got an election coming up, right? So Powell has cut rates. So all of that is saying bullishness for the stock market, not necessarily bearish, but as Jacob said, over time, when they cut rates, usually the market falls. And again, we can talk about this when we do the special podcast on money, because it's the opposite, right? And just quickly, if interest rates are falling, and we've seen this on the socials, people say, oh, well, rates are going down, more people will borrow. No. More people may want to borrow. But as I said, I think a few weeks ago, if you go to the bank and say, hey, rates are cheaper, I want more money, they go, nah. Well, that's the end of it. You don't get the money. And so the point there is that the banks are the ones that control the amount of credit in the economy. You know, I want to go and borrow 10 million. Great, get a bank to lend it to you. Oh, no one will lend it. Okay, well, there's not going to be another 10 million in the economy then, is there? So my point being, when people think, oh, low rates means people will borrow more, well, it means people may want to borrow more, but it doesn't mean the banks are going to lend, because if the banks are saying, well, what do you want to do with it, Jacob? Oh, I want to start a business and blah, blah, blah. And the banks are going, gee, mate, the economy's actually not doing that well. Yeah, but rates are cheap. It's like, yeah, we know, but we want you to pay back the loan.
Well, it's not as if the rates are low, quote unquote. They've just had a 0.5%.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They're not low.
Well, in Australia, we're not even cutting rates, right? Even though the economy's, virtually in a recession.
Nowhere. Yeah.
But it's definitely not the way it is in the US.
Well, it's interesting. So the Australian unemployment remains steady. I think you mentioned in this week's, the week that was, the video you did for the members, we're at about 4%, give or take, unemployment, plus another 6 in underemployment.
Yes.
So you can add them up and equal 10, or you can make more of a conservative around 7 or 8%.
Yep.
Including underemployment and unemployment. We're just not going anywhere. So we've got to start spending.
Yes.
Pretty soon, you'd think.
Well, I think personally, unemployment rate now, I think personally, is useless as an indicator of how the economy is going. And the simple reason is, fine, we've got 4.2% unemployment. Now, dare I say it, in my day, anything under 5 was classed as full employment. And what that was saying, oh, well, there'll be probably 2% of employment who are in transition to another job. Oh, okay. There'll probably be another 2% who are, seasonal workers. Right, okay, well, that's about 4%. Okay, so they don't really count. But the point was, back then, everybody had full-time jobs, right? There wasn't like people having 2 and 3
Yeah, and
part-time
lots
jobs.
of contractors now, right?
Absolutely.
Uber Eats and all that sort of stuff.
And so when people go, 4% unemployment, the economy's booming, it's like, dude, we've got economic growth of less than 1%. That is not a booming economy.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about a booming economy, you go to the United States where it's 3% real, nominal about 5%. That's where things are really, and wages are rising and houses are rising and, the stock market's going gangbusters. They've got an investment boom.
Well, productivity's up.
Yeah.
Which is
Monday, right, commercial and industrial loans at banks increased, rising 4.3 billion to 2.78 trillion.
With a T.
So what do you
a T.
reckon? We're trying to get the percentage of household debt even higher?
Well, no, that's commercial and industrial, Tom.
Okay.
So that's business.
Ah.
So what's that telling you? Business are borrowing because they're looking at it going, man, things are really good. We need to borrow and expand.
Presumably being incentivised to do that as
Absolutely, with the investment boom.
Yeah.
Will they have massive issues on their inflation, though?
No, not necessarily.
No? It's just a question.
No, because see, again, with inflation, people are saying, it's the old argument with inflation is it's too much money chasing too few goods, right? Everybody's got all this money and everybody wants a Toyota and we can't get enough Toyotas and Toyota's going to, raise the price, right? Well, we don't have that anymore because we've got places like China who can knock out 1 million iPhones a week. So, it's not as if we're going, oh, dude, we're running at full capacity, right? So if, again, like you say, Jacob, if we went, oh, man, unemployment's really low, dude, there's 6% of people who want more work. If you offer them a decent wage, like we said last week, Tom, remember the podcast where we said, bullshit, give them a decent job. If you offered a heap of people who are underemployed and said, listen, Jacob, I'll put you on 9 to 5, how about that? You'd go, that's fantastic, Steve. When do I start? I'm quitting my 2 part-time jobs because now I've got 1 full-time job where I can earn enough money, right? Well, if you've got 6% of people spare, that's not inflation,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Right? And what the studies are showing, because again, in COVID, when prices went up, everybody went, oh, it's too much demand and wages are booming. It's like, sorry, that's bullshit. It's companies putting the price up because they know they can. And you expect it. You go in and, my coffee went from $4 to $4.50. Oh, well, yeah, it's inflation. Right? I don't say to myself, well, that's bullshit. That's outrageous. I'm going somewhere else, right? Because you expect it. Right? Oh, petrol prices are crazy. Yeah, well, price of oil is really high. No, it's not. So what I'm saying is inflation is, there's 2 kinds of inflation. Cost push, which is oil prices are rising. I've got to put the price of my plastic bottles up because they contain oil, right? That's a supply issue.
Yep.
Or the demand issue is everybody wants plastic bottles. I'm going to put the price up to stem the flow, right? The demand flow, right? And what I can tell you is when wages are not rising, well, I'm sorry, it's not people rushing out to say we've got to have 2 packets of Dorito corn chips.
Yeah. They're just upping the prices.
Well, the other thing is too, they're talking about, energy prices are really high, governments are subsidising it. But my point being, if you get a wage rise, you don't go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave the bloody bedroom lights on. You don't do that, right? You're not out there saying, I want some more energy. I want another light in the house, right? That's garbage, right? It's the energy companies going, guess what, mate? We can hike 10% and they don't know. That's what's
Or they'll pay it.
Well,
They have to. Or we'll turn it off.
That's exactly right, See, when governments owned it, the government could say, all right, listen, let's just keep it at the same level politically. But see, now all of that stuff, and gets back to what I was saying to you guys about government selling stuff to the private sector who now say, we'll put it up 10%. And the government's now going, oh, Jesus, we better subsidise energy. Right? Well, all they're doing is subsidising the bloody company.
And they'll put it up even more.
Yeah. Whereas the government should say, listen, I'll tell you what, we'll buy your company, you blokes nick off, and we'll leave the price at the same, and we'll run a deficit, but people will have cheap energy. So anyhow, that's
What's on Tuesday?
one for another day. Nice chart.
Well, this is, it explains why we use mean reversion as one of our main guiding principles. And this is a simple kind of technical indicator to show that it's really difficult to pick an individual stock.
Yeah.
But first of all, it's individual to pick one stock. It's hard, to pick one stock, but it's even harder to pick one stock over and over and over again and be consistently profitable, which is why our strategies heavily contain the use of ETFs.
Yep.
And looking at the sector or the market as a whole to see whether it's cheap or overvalued. Is there anything else you want to cover on this one, Steve?
Well, no, not really. Just basically saying that what you said, when you look at NVIDIAs and Intels and that sort of stuff, you look at it and go, oh, man, and I think we talked about this a few weeks ago where, Fortescue was up 41% in 2023.
Yeah.
This year it's down like 31 or something, right? And that's what I mean. Like when they're up 40, you're going, oh, man, this is gangbusters.
Yeah.
I'm going to hang on to this sucker forever. And then it loses 30%. You go, what the hell's going on, right? Yeah. That's the way it happens. NVIDIA is still on a PE of, God knows what, 80 or something. They all go back to the field.
Well, if there's ever an argument for rebalancing, this is another one, right?
Perfect.
And this image, what's good about this, I haven't seen this chart before till the week the was came out, but it's kind of staggering how few companies, if they're in the top 100 one year, remain the top 100 the following year.
Yeah. But think about buy and hold. They're saying you should hold it for 30 years.
But in 2022, 3. Think of how many companies are out there.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, there's 100 in the top 100. 3 of them.
Yep. So
ridiculous.
Think of your chances of hanging on to them or getting into them at the low. But there's a really good strategy called Dogs of the Dow, which is buy the bottom 10. The Dow's got 30 companies, right? And
yes.
this guy Michael said, buy the bottom 10, right, that have done the worst, right? January the 1st, wake up, buy the 10 losers, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Come back 12 months later, you've probably made money, flip it. And what he showed was, it outperforms the Dow, right?
Yeah, because if it's lost 2 years...
Michael Higgins? Yeah.
If it's in the bottom 10 2 years in a row, then...
You just keep... If you rebalance all the time, you do fine. But again, you're talking about the Dow Jones where you've got the 30 seriously big companies, right? They're not, junior penny stocks.
They're not going to go broke overnight.
Generally
for the
not.
most part.
Generally not, yeah.
And hindsight investing is really easy as well. It's easy to look at a video now and go,
I've made a fortune hindsight investing.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Foresight investing, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit patchy.
You've done all right.
It's a little bit patchy.
Wednesday,
Righto.
US economy again. So the real growth is roughly 3%. Nominal, as we've mentioned, is 6%, so it's going gangbusters. And what's this chart show? Retail sales. So it's increased 0.1%. Which why are we?
It's holding steady.
Why is
mate.
this?
It's holding steady.
Well,
It's not going backwards, right?
That's the point, Tom.
Yeah.
Everyone's going, oh man, the US is in a recession. It's like, really?
Retail's increasing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. You're not looking at it going, oh man, retail's collapsed 5%.
Yeah, well, it's not decreasing anyway.
That's a good point.
So-
But the other thing is too, here's a really, really important point that people should think about. In the 1980s, we had what was in the 70s, sorry, and 60s and 50s, we had a producer economy. And what I mean by that was when we leveled Europe and we had the baby boomers, after the war, we were building lots of stuff. Now, it was building lots of stuff like roads and bridges and factories for future consumption, right? When we hit the 80s, we turned into a sort of consumer economy. So the baby boomers like me and a little older, we were hitting 20, 25, buying houses, right, starting to invest. There was all of those things that turned us into a consumer economy, right? And so what I'm saying is I think we're heading back to being more of a producing economy again. So we're now back into, in the US, the jobs will be in semiconductors and building factories, not selling Nike shoes. Do you see the difference? Mm-hmm. Right? We've got more people producing stuff rather than buying stuff. Now, the buying stuff will come down the road, but at the moment we're rebuilding, bridges and roads and factories and semiconductors and bombs and bullets and stuff. That's a producer economy, right? That's what places like Germany, Japan and China are about. They're about building stuff, not buying stuff. They hate that. They hate that sort of stuff, right? They leave that to us and the Americans and the British. If those people want to buy Nike shoes, well, just make Nike shoes.
Oh, it's like when Thatcher closed the mines down and just imported all the coal.
Yes. But my point being there, that's when, again, you've got to look at the figures like we talked about unemployment before, right? That's not necessarily a good indicator anymore of the strength of the economy. Mm-hmm. But because GDP's at less than 1%, well, that's not very good. Oh, yeah, but unemployment's at 4%. Mm. It's like, I know, but there's 5 million Uber drivers.
It's decoupled.
And they're earning, they're in 3 jobs. They're part of the 6% underutilised.
Well, the data that we're used to looking at to tell that, it's decoupled away from reality. So people are still looking at that number going, oh, we're okay. But the reality of it is that we're not. So we need to find a different data point.
Yep. See, retail sales have increased 0.1. Oh, that's not very good. Yeah, but investment booms, the investment boom, as I put in on Monday, commercial and industrial loans are booming. Oh, well, that's good. So which one's more important? Well, at the moment, America is reshoring and rebuilding and, the government spending 6.5% to 7% of GDP. They're remilitarising, right? They're getting housing starts again. So you look at that and go, well, actually, we should pay more attention to commercial and industrial loans rather than the commercial sales.
Which is a much better measure.
The retail sales.
Which is a way better measure of productivity, right?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thursday, financial stress.
Got a chart here.
Whereas in Australia...
There's some figures showing financial stress.
Well,
sorry, folks,
Where
it's a really bad, like really tiny chart, but you can't see it up there.
It'll be up on the video version of the podcast.
Yeah. And if you blow it up on the document, essentially I'm just saying there's, creeping stress.
Well, more and more people are using the savings to pay off the mortgage, which we've known for a while.
And that's going to run out.
Yeah. The money pot will deplete eventually. And then what? Sell your house?
Well, that's what Michelle said last week, didn't she? Ah, well, just sell your house. But again, how can you talk about Australia, doing well when we got increasing financial stress, right? wages are not running that well, and we've got overall economic growth, which, the mainstream would say, yeah, but mate, growth's really good. Well, no, it's not. It's under 1.
Yeah. And
Right?
there's more and more people who are missing payments now.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah. Well, see, as we go on longer and longer, there's more and more people who go, listen, we knew we had 18 months. The RBA's not cutting rates. We're going to have to make a decision, right? Because they just can't sustain it.
I wonder what that'll mean for the bank stocks.
Sorry?
I wonder what that means for the bank stocks.
Well, they'll still lend money if people have to sell their house.
Yeah, but the question is at what price?
It's like the mortgage brokers do just as well if
Well,
it's dropping.
yeah, same with real estate
They'll
agents.
go nuts, yeah.
They're still, they're the intermediaries. Like realestate.com will still be sort of probably,
I've got gangbusters. Everyone's selling their house.
Well, it doesn't matter
matter
to
what
them
price.
because they're not dependent on the price of the house sale. They're just depending on the advertising. Right? And you still got to advertise to sell.
Yeah, but I mean, what I've said, the banks are forecasting X profits and then they actually deliver Y and it's less than their forecast.
Yeah. Well, CBA's got 60% of their loan book as
Well, that's what I-
mortgages. I
that's
mean,
what
that's
I
a
mean.
very, very large amount of risk in my book.
What's the US, like 20%?
Yeah, 20, 25 or something.
Oh, we will see, won't we? Friday.
Indeedy.
All right, Friday. We've got an interesting chart here. Top 5 highest failure rates by industry. As of August this year, food and beverage services at the top of the charts at 8.2%, which is interesting.
Highest failure rates.
Yeah.
Must be difficult in the
Hospitality.
hospitality.
Well, what's the first thing you'd knock off? Coffee, eating out.
Not if you're Australian. That's not Australian.
Yeah.
The coffee shops are booming.
We just whinge about it.
Yeah. But you'd look at that and go, oh my God, that's terrible. But again, if you said, well, hang on, no, it's not. It's just that Tom's no longer working 4 hours a week at the coffee shop. He's now secured a long-term job, in a semiconductor factory or building a bridge or something like that. You look at it and go, oh, that's terrible. It's like, well, no, not really. It's just we're transitioning from every man and his dog's opened a coffee shop on the street corner to, and they're just making ends meet to, well, actually, I'm going to close the shop down and I'm going to go and work at, somewhere else for a better stable pay with, superannuation and stuff.
Way
Sick
less
leave.
stress.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, again, pointing out that if things are tough, and I think they are, if my local shopping centre's anything to go by, it's, people are cutting back, right?
It's like natural selection. The best survive, the rest of them die off.
Yeah.
It's very Darwinian.
But what it does, Jacob, is when you put rates up, and this goes to Tom's point about productivity, if you've got 5 shops competing in the same space, if interest rates are really low and the cost of operating is low because you've got low wages, right, you don't have to sell that many coffees, right? But when the prices go up and the wages go up, then you have to say, okay, how can I survive, right? And that's when you go, actually, this place is only big enough for 2 coffee shops. So 3 of us are going to get the bullet. You've got to be more productive. So therefore, you've got to say, okay, I need to work out how can I get the customers to buy a piece of cake, right? Even though times are tough. So how can I convince them to part with $15, not $5, right? And stuff like that. So I can just tell you from the last week, I went to a club for my daughter's awards night, and I ordered a glass of red wine. Right now, it was a big glass, but it's not a mug.
It was
is
a bottle.
It had a little top on it. But my point being, it was $20, right, for a glass of wine. And I went yesterday. I went and collected my daughter.
Penfolds Grange or something?
No, mate. Listen, that's what I mean. It wasn't even like it's not like, oh, Steve, mate, you got to lay off the French stuff. It's a fairly, okay glass of wine. Right, but it's $20. And I went to the Sunshine Coast yesterday, picked up my daughter, 5 minutes out of Coolum, I said, let's have a cup of coffee. I had a flat white. She had an iced chai latte. I had a ham cheese croissant. She had a chocolate, croissant thing. $28.
Yeah.
Outrageous, isn't it?
But that's what I mean. You look at it and say, okay, I'm not going to be doing this every day of the week. Like when, you go $28, it's like, okay, they've made a mistake there somewhere, right? And you look at it and go, no, $5 for the flat white, which is as big as bloody thimble, $10 for a ham cheese croissant. The iced latte must have been $5 or $6 or something. But you know what I mean? Like you go, well, hang on, I need to cut back.
And then you go to the cafe twice the next day.
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
He's
in the cafe every morning.
He's not cutting back. He's gone to 2 cafes today already.
Well, I calculate it. I spend $98 a week on coffee.
Oh, must be nice.
There you go.
No, it's not nice.
That was 15 seconds work.
But when one's done so well,
Yeah.
it's a
I'm
fraction.
keeping the local coffee shop afloat.
You
Steve's
probably
a
buy it with this week's profit.
It's actually a major shareholder.
I thought about buying it actually when it was up for sale, but you can't grow it.
Just put the kids in there, mate.
No, but you
Free
can't.
labour.
Yeah, but you can't. Businesses have got to grow, right? And that's the problem with a lot of hospitality. If you've got 10 seats, just for argument's sake, well, you got 10 seats, right? So you're limited because you can't say, oh, well, I'll stuff in 20 seats. And that's the same with a little bit the same with an investment property, right? I've got 3 bedrooms. Oh, well, I can't put in 10 people in 3 bedrooms. You can only put in 3.
Well, some cultures.
Well, yeah, that's true. But do you know what I mean? Like what I'm saying is when I looked at the coffee shop, I thought, oh, that should be great. But then when I sat down and went, okay, how can I grow the business where it keeps expanding like Coca-Cola?
Buy more of them.
Right? Well,
Franchise
but you've still got the same profit ratio,
Well,
right? So if it was that good, one person would own 10 coffee shops like people leveraging up residential property. So it works, but it gets to a point where, like now, a lot of coffee shops, as we showed, are falling. Why? Because people are saying, I think I'll just cut back the coffee and make it at home.
yeah. I've noticed a lot of cafes up for sale at the moment as well.
Well, you see, this is why I say you guys are young and you haven't been through a really serious recession, right? Where people lose jobs and businesses close down because in COVID, the government went, it's cool, we're going to throw money at everybody,
I
right?
wonder if people come to a TMM coffee shop, coffee and finance. We might be on.
Well, there's already one like that, isn't there?
There's some crypto coffee.
The
shops.
money
crypto.
cafe, Alan Kohler and what's his name, Stephen Mayne.
We do better.
Anyway, we're friends with everybody.
Bonus section. Europe and cars and COVID. Europe and cars. So basically Europe need to decide on how many vehicles they're going to allow China to export to the EU without damaging their own car manufacturers. Now, help me understand how, and this could be an ignorant question, someone like Germany, who are a massive car exporter and manufacturer of VW, Audi, and the rest, how can they be impacted by China's imports?
Because they allow China to sell EVs into the country for a fraction of what it costs them to build.
Do you think that's actually a thing though? Like, it's Germany.
Well, it used to be.
And I'm just asking, I'm just being a dick about it. Cause
Yeah.
they're like
And I don't know
50
the
No, no, no.
answer either.
The difference, let me explain the difference to you. The difference is, I was going to say always, and it's close to always. The difference is between the individual and the collective. Okay, so VW came out and said, dude, don't put tariffs on Chinese cars. Right? Now, VW are the number one manufacturer of cars in Germany, right? It's American as Coca-Cola. It's as German as VW, right? Now, they've closed a factory. Now, why would VW say don't put tariffs on Germany, on Chinese imports? They manufacture in China, right? The German CEO doesn't go, oh, man, we got to look after the German people. They don't give a shit about the German people. They're making profit for a company, for shareholders. The shareholders would be going, why aren't we bringing in cars from China? Oh, because the government won't let us. Stuff the government. I want my money as a shareholder, right? So again, This is the difference between the company saying, we don't care, I'm not German. Yeah, I was born in Germany, but I'm a globalist.
Yeah, I want to, like, my job's to make this profitable.
I want to pay myself $50 million a year with a bonus, right? I don't care if we're importing the vehicles from China. Oh, well, you guys at the VW factory might care because now you haven't got a job. But that's not my fault. So my daughter just writing to me wanting money for Macca's. Jeez, they're good, aren't they? But
tapping the well, mate.
Yeah, so my point being,
Well for.
that's where you, yeah, well for. Yeah, this bloody well's running dry, mate.
That bucket's got a hole in it.
But my point being, that's what's going on, you see, because Europe have been competitive in making cars. Now they're experiencing what the Americans and the Australians and the British experienced in 1980, right? When the Japanese said, why are you guys making Holdens? We can ship them over to you, these little Toyota Corollas. They're really fuel efficient. They're really good quality. And you guys can buy them for $15,000, right? Now, my company bought a Nissan Pulsar, which was my first sales car that I drove around in. And I remember it was $12,500, $13,500 with air conditioning.
Bargain.
Did you get the aircon?
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I said, but I tell you, true story. My boss was a bit like, nah. And I was like, dude, I can't get out of the car looking like I'm hot and sweaty.
Yeah.
Right? But my point being, you think about cars, they are still relatively as cheap as that. Right? Why? Because of the productivity, right? Every car's got air conditioning. Every car's got power steering. Every car's got power windows. Right now they got bloody like Wi-Fi and, all that sort of stuff. But in those days, that was where we said, well, okay, if the Japanese want to export them to us, good-o. And that's where Germany and Europe are now, because the Chinese are basically saying to them, you guys, we can ship these EVs, right? They're EVs, they're the latest. You guys want to be environmentally friendly, don't you? Well, you should be buying our EVs. They're really cheap, right? And they're really good, and they got lots of bells and whistles on them. Now, China's subsidising the buggery out of them, but that's all Germany used to do anyway, and the Japanese, they still do. So now Germany has got to make a decision, but the problem is VW are saying, well, no, don't put tariffs on because we want to import to make more money for the company. The German government are going, well, that's all right for you guys, but we've got to look after 5,000, we've got to look after 100,000 VW workers. Nah, they'll find something else to do. It's like, nah, they're not going to punish the VW CEO, are they? Because you can't vote for him, but you could sure as hell vote for the government. That's the crux of the problem, right? And that's becoming really, really difficult because China's now dominating so many industries, right? But they're subsidising all those industries. And so we of the free trade, trade should be free. It's like, well, yeah, but it shouldn't be subsidised like the Japanese and the Chinese and the Germans have all been doing. What's happened now is that Germany's getting a taste of its own medicine. That's really what's going on, right? So now we're saying to them, oh, how do you like that stuff, right? You want to create heaps of unemployment, but hey, you'll get cheap cars from China. Excuse me while I transfer some money.
That's right.
Or we got short story next, which is covering the COVID section of the podcast. So obviously, COVID's sickness has increased exponentially, and this first chart here is showing the change in economic inactivity due to sickness from 2020 by about 900,000 missing workers from the beginning of 2024. Is this Australian or is this globally? Not sure.
Let me read quickly. Excess inactivity. I think that is global.
Yeah. So what we're saying here is that there's inactivity in the economy due to things that have happened post-COVID. And I know for a fact that in the area I work in, we're seeing people every week drop out of work for a few days, and you take some time off. They've coughs, headaches, all that kind of stuff. So that all, you times that by, in Australia, 13 or 14 million, and you've got some serious inactivity in the workplace, which impacts growth.
100%. And the next couple of articles, right, also on COVID. Article from the 17th of September, US sees over 5.3 million cases, over 360,000 hospitalizations, and over 41,000 deaths. They didn't specify which time frame.
What, as in?
Well, like what time frame those cases are? Is that?
That will probably be year to date. So in 9 months, they've had 41,350 deaths. And everyone's gone, oh, that's interesting. Oh, the economy's booming.
So this could further play into the potential predictions around workforce and reduced number of workers.
Remember last week, I think we talked about nurses and we said doctors are going to have to choose who lives and dies because there was a shortage of saline. Nurses had sort of got to the point where they were like, we've had enough of this. Part of it was they're not allowed to mask up. And so the nurses are saying, well, now we're getting COVID all the time. We know, and if you look at the last one, it says COVID sufferers never been this sick as they detail symptoms amid new strain. So this is where this stuff's going to, it's like demographics, right? You look at it and go, oh, yeah, it'll be a problem in the future. At some point, the future arrives and they go, man, we are short of some workers. It's like, well, there are, 5% of the workforce or 2% of the workforce is sick, 2% are boomers and they've gone, see ya, I'm off because we've got enough money to retire. I'm not interested in working again. We'll offer you good money. No, thanks, I'm going to the Bahamas. And the people are going, I'm not going in those hospitals to get COVID and be sick as a worker. What about if we pay you an extra 35 grand a year? Oh, think about it. I mean, we'll provide masks and blah, blah, blah. That's why I'm saying it's changing, and as the US builds more investment in semiconductors and military stuff, people are going to be able to say, look, guys your age, not my age, but guys your age will be able to say, well, if you want me to do that, let me tell you, I want good money, right? And employers, predominantly government, will drive it because the government will say, Jacob, we want you to, help us build bombs and we'll pay you 120 grand a year, right? And Jacob says, oh, look, I'm getting 130 in my current job. And they say, right, well, we'll make it 160. Jacob says, all right, that's sold. So he goes to government. The company says, but Jacob, you got a good job here. No, thanks, mate. They're paying me 160. So the company has to say, all right, when we either need to find a replacement for Jacob at less than 160,000.
Or pay more.
Right? And that's where you start to get a change in the dynamics.
So Jacob's getting into the bomb game.
I'm already hitting bombs.
Bombs and bullets.
All
but
right,
do you see my point?
Yeah.
It's a really, this is where things are starting to change a bit, where you're seeing more strikes, right? Why? Because the employer, the unions and the employees are sensing that there's opportunities, right, to turn the clock back where, as I say, capital's had a really good run for 40 years. Well, now it's time for Labor to say, guys, you're now going to start paying me because you've been taking advantage of me by, using China and all that sort of stuff. That's all over now, so now you can start paying me a decent wage. And by the way, I want to work from home and, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. On that note, that's a wrap for today.
then let's talk Let's talk about chow. So just quickly, I think we mentioned it briefly on last week's podcast, but private new home sales remained weak in August, and we're not like talking about micro little months, but it's interesting to see that we've got a housing shortage in Australia, but new home sales are not really selling, or they've taken a decline for the last 4 months. Looking at the chart, would that be due to people just not wanting to buy in the outer suburbs? Like,
well, it's 1%.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get across is, and I think, did we talk it in this week or last week, where we talked about people buying existing properties?
Yes, we did.
Right?
Last week.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, if we've got this urgency about all these people overflowing, why are home sales weak? Because you would naturally go, man, there's all these people who want to buy a home. Man, just keep building the homes. They want to buy them. So why are home sales actually falling? Now, you can say, oh, well, it's bad land planning and, stuff. But I'm just raising the point of, hang on, well, shouldn't home sales be selling? Because even an investor would say, yeah, just build a home. Build it with 4 bedrooms. There's all these homeless people who are going to, be renting off me. Mm-hmm. And they're going to rent off me at top dollar because there's a rental shortage. Right? Look, do you see what I mean? If we had a really strong sector, well, wouldn't home sales be booming? Well, they're not booming. That's all I'm just pointing out that sometimes
new home sales.
Well, sometimes you have to look at the fundamentals and say, well, is it really a supply and demand argument? Is it really too much immigration? Is it really, I'm not saying it's not, but it's the same with stocks where people go, it's the stock price is rising because of X. And it's like, yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable. But
is that why? Yeah.
Yeah, is that actually why? Because, again, a lot of people, particularly economists, just get lazy and go, it's because of X. That's what I learned in year 1 at uni. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really the way it happens. But I just find it astounding that we're complaining that we've got a housing shortage and yet home sales are not doing that well.
Well, new home sales are predominantly being built in outer suburbs, we're in Brisbane, like your Griffins, like your North Lakes, and then further out. And to your point a few weeks ago, who the hell wants to live there? If you're if you're immigrating into Australia.
Yeah. Well, if you, like we said too, Jacob,
I live in Griffin, by the way.
If you live in the city, it's $150 a week to, get to and from work, and it takes an hour and a half. But if they said to you, listen, Jay, you can work at home, you'd go, I just saved myself $150, right? And you've got a better quality of lifestyle, that sort of stuff. So I just think it's interesting, right? When you say, oh man, if you could build houses, you'd sell them for hotcakes. Apparently not, right? So, and that's why I say it seems interesting that we spend a lot of money just buying existing properties. That's where negative gearing's a problem. Right? And that's why I think there's a little bit of a thing about negative gearing should be for new home building, because that's when you're contributing to the economy. You're not doing anything by just me buying your property and I negatively gear it. There's still 3 people living in the house, right? So that does nothing. But if I say, well, listen, I'll build a place, then the government says, hey, well, that's all right. That's good on you. And we'll give you some, if you're only getting 600 rent and it costs you 800, we'll give you a tax, incentive on the 200. So that's, as I say, that's for Australia to try and work out. But it just strikes me as, rather ironic. We're all screaming about housing shortages and yet there's, new home sales are falling. They will say also again, oh, well, there's not enough labour, right?
Expensive to build.
Yeah, well,
all that stuff.
Pay the wages, mate. I think you'll find there'll be a fair few tradies going, you won me.
All right, Tommy,
Anyway.
now we can wrap up.
All right. I was a bit too eager. All right. Thanks, everyone. Be sure to jump on the website, subscribe to The Week That Was, so you can get a copy of these documents as well. Cheers.
See you, folks.
Stay up to date on our socials. Just search for Total Money Management on Instagram and TikTok. For your free investor personality assessment, go to totalmoneymanagement.com.au. And as always, remember, we don't provide financial advice.